Part 7. Take note of the claws. If the claws are extended or tense, use extreme caution. Cats are fast, and your cat may be preparing to strike. Section 2, Part 1. Determine the offense. What did you do to make your cat so mad at you? Did you make fun of her? How would you make fun of a cat, especially if, like, verbally it doesn't understand things? How would you make fun of a cat? Because you can't hurt a cat's feelings the same way that you hurt an emotional snowflake's feelings. A cat's not going to be like that. And also, if you are genetically engineering cat girls for domestic ownership and you make them like emotionally sensitive snowflakes who get offended at everything, then you're evil. That adds to human suffering. It does not add to human well-being. That is an act of evil. It makes you wonder why these ideologies are being spread in humanity and human society if it is not leading to greater human well-being. Big think. Continuing with the article. Did you step on her tail? Did you take her spot on the couch? Wow. Knowing what you did wrong will help you decide how to approach your cat aside. Sometimes, like in a relationship, like an actual human relationship, not talking about parody stuff, sometimes you do something that your partner finds is wrong, but they can't explain how it's wrong. They just feel that you did something wrong. And no matter how you try and logically go through it, there is no logic to it because it's an emotional accusation. You cannot have instability guiding the relationship itself. If something occurs where you point out, this is a completely irrational anger that you're holding towards me, then that should be respected instead of, again, this bullshit snowflake culture. That's like, oh, you need to respect my feelings and all this. I'm not going to respect your insanity. You cannot have stability from principles based on insanity, and emotional capriciousness absolutely applies to that. I think a big thing that's going to come up in the parody book is how cats have a reputation for being, emotionally wavering and all of this, but that they're still more emotionally stable and sane than humans are. So they'll have more character than most humans. Actually, this is another thing that it would be objectively evil. If you train your genetically engineered cat girls, like with their upbringing and their schooling and all this, if you have them exposed to social media and all that, if they're like on their cell phones constantly, addicted to social media, that's not mentally healthy. If you can control that, if you're in a situation where you can determine, okay, here's what our training regimen is like, here's what they have access to, here's what they don't have access to. Social media exposure and all the stresses that go along with it would be evil. It would not advance their well-being, especially if they already have a community, an enclosed situation. Like, think of an academy of something. That would, just going over the logistics in my head, that would be a book in itself. How do you bring up these genetically engineered cat girls? You'd have like academies full of cat girls that you're training to be good maids and good housewives, and that would be very interesting in and of itself. That would make a good anime. But if you have control, so going back to the concept here, if you have control over what is and isn't allowed, then you would want to enhance the quality of that individual as much as possible, and you would want them to be as mentally stable as possible, and you'd want them to develop as much personal character as possible. The conditions for broader society that humans face do not facilitate those things. But I will continue going on about apologizing to your cat. So we're talking about determining what offended your cat. Here are some examples of what you might have done to offend your cat and what you could do to show that you're sorry. If your cat was offended by you making fun of it, you'll probably have to offer some treats and praise. If you accidentally stepped on your cat's tail or startled her by dropping a pot, a simple cuddle may be all that's needed. Aside, isn't that the answer to everything, though? Isn't that the best way to apologize, as cuddles? I mean, this is especially appropriate if there was like some kind of physical injury or physical discomfort that was involved. Let's say I was cooking something and I turned around with a frying pan and I accidentally smacked her with a frying pan. That's like comical and ridiculous and stupid. But the way that I would instinctively think, how would I apologize for this, would not be like me being hands off about it and just give her a bunch of treats. If someone is hurting, a way to comfort that hurt is positive physical interaction, contact comfort. And here's another instinct going back to my understanding of pain management. Contact comfort is absolutely important. It's actually for maintenance of pain management. This is not for being a painkiller, because deprivation from physical contact, if you do not have positive physical interactions on a regular basis. So I often talk about having positive social contact on a regular basis. It's also important to have positive physical contact on a regular basis. If you don't have that, if you don't have hugs in your daily life, if you don't have cuddles in your daily life, then you are going to experience a pain response. And this is not an acute pain response, like sharp jolting pains going on. It's going to be a persistent, medically speaking, it is a chronic pain response. Hug deprivation leads to a chronic pain response. This is something that we can see within the hormones and chemicals that are in someone's bloodstream, and also like organ health and even brain health, for markers of being stressed out for a long period of time. Yes, other things go into stress management than just having positive social interaction and positive physical interaction. There are more factors to it, like if you exercise a lot, that's something that can mitigate pain responses, and also depending on what you eat, that could agitate inflammatory responses and add to physical pain. And also having good sleep is important. There's a whole lot of things that have to go right for you to not suffer in existence. And one aspect that has to fall into place is you need to have hugs in your life. Let's just play it straight. You need to have hugs in your life. Otherwise, you're going to be suffering. If there is unintended pain that you have inflicted upon a close acquaintance, if I have injured my cat girl, then I want to apologize for that injury in a physical manner that's offering comforts for her. Absolutely. And wait a second. How would that work for medical treatment? Because if your cat girl gets injured, would you take her to the veterinarian or would you take her to a hospital? These stupid questions like that. But I think that like pretty much enough is human about them, that if there's a cut that's on their arm and they need stitches, that you take them to the emergency room. But if there was like an ear infection, so it's the cat part of them that's messed up, you wouldn't take them to a human doctor. You take them to an animal doctor for that, probably. I'm not too sure how to adjudicate that situation. Anyway, back to talking about what to do to show that you're sorry about your cat, back from the article. If you took your cat's favorite spot on the couch, consider vacating the spot and giving your cat a treat. Yes, bribery works. And there's a picture. I'm just mentally reading this in my head in Japanese, because there's a caricature that's bowing, very polite, slight bow, not like a royal bow at a ballroom dance. No, just a very polite, slight bow. So it makes the body language makes me think of the modern Japanese formal bow, and saying "I'm sorry" to the cat. The cat's looking. The cat doesn't understand human gestures like a bow. Do all humans understand bow? No, all humans. I think all primates. But definitely all humans understand an apologetic gesture from a lowering of the head going down. So there's various different kinds of bows in various different cultures. There's a handful of facial expressions. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but there are a few universal facial expressions that express certain emotions, but there are some body language things that at least all primates understand as markers of subservience versus markers of aggression, such as puffing up your chest, you're cocked up getting ready to fight. That kind of body language is universally understood across pretty much every culture. I'd have to look into that, but there's certain things that you'd instinctively understand, but I don't think cats would understand that. Maybe a genetically engineered cat girl would be trained to understand the various human gestures, and that would be a big part of acculturation, getting someone adapted to a certain culture based off of their training and all of that. And that's another thing that I love writing about parahumans. Again, something that is human-like but has something different about them. So like a robot could be programmed in a completely different way than the genetic programming that affects human behavior. And a genetically engineered cat girl could have a completely different acculturation that changes how she responds to various gestures and everything. So it's just absurd to think of bowing to your house cat like a normal four-legged cat. That just seems absurd to bow to your cat. The cat's not going to care. The cat doesn't understand that. I'd be very interested to see if there's anything with vocalizations that comes up, because that's an important thing. That's also kind of like tone can be universal in a certain way, where if you're trying to calm things down, things go slower. If you're really angry and you're really frustrated at something, then your voice goes up. You can feel the difference in tone between those two different presentations. I don't remember if I have that scene like actually fitting in somewhere, or if that was kind of like a practice session where, because there's a language barrier between the main character and his cat girl, she's saying stuff in Russian that he has no idea what's going on, but it's ridiculously calming to him because of the way that she's saying it. He doesn't have to understand her language at all to hear her purring in his ear, essentially. And, if it were just purring, I mean, that's with like real cats. That's something that is very calming to a lot of people, to hear their cats purring, even though there's no language that's going on there. But continuing back with the article of apologizing to your cat, such absurdity. Okay. Choose a good time to apologize. If your cat is visibly angry, you will need to give it some time before you try to approach it and apologize. Approaching too soon may result in getting scratched. See, now they say scratched instead of being slapped, but going back to the article. Try not to wait too long to apologize. However, instead approach the cat as soon as it appears calmer. You can also approach a frightened cat, but do so with caution. Refer to the section in this article on reading your cat's body language to determine your cat's mood. If your cat keeps running away from you, consider leaving behind a small treat in a place where it can find. This will let it know that you are sorry and still care about it. Again, bribery. Continuing. A frightened cat should be approached with care. Always give a frightened cat room to escape. It may actually need comfort and reassurance, especially if there was a loud, sudden sound. At the same time, however, it may want to be alone, which is why leaving the escape route is so important. A cornered cat may quickly turn aggressive. End of paragraph. So it's repeating stuff here, which is not good writing, but you get the gist of that. A very important thing about timing and apologizing, especially when it's hard to verbalize things, and also if the cognitive function of the creature does not have a wide time horizon. Like pets can't understand English very well, and they can't understand like abstract concepts like, last week I made that mistake when I turned around with a frying pan and hit you in the face. I'm really sorry for that. Waiting a week to apologize for that is much less effective than in the moment immediately apologizing. Also, another problem with just relying on giving treats is your pet will not necessarily associate you giving the treats as a form of apology. So if the cat acts scared and you give it a treat, when it acts scared, it might act scared again because it thinks that's a way of getting a treat. So you have to be careful about how you apply that. And that's also why it's very important to consider how you teach animals, how you train animals. And it's also very important to consider in the wider perspective. It's very important to understand the implications of your behavior when bringing up a kid, when being a proper parent, teaching your child how to behave properly. Bribery and giving your kid treats to like apologize doesn't necessarily help. You have to be very careful about how you do that so that the kid associates the treat with a good behavior, and so that you're not incentivizing a bad behavior. Like if the kid cries a whole lot and you give them ice cream to get them to stop crying, that might be an easy way to get them to stop crying, but then they might cry just to get ice cream. You do not want to form improper associations that actually encourage bad behavior. And actually, a lot of people don't have the abstract thinking capability to consider how their behavior affects the mood and the learning process of others. So that's another complexity where a lot of people do not have the responsibility to be good teachers, good trainers. I mean, that would be something important to consider if I did have, if I ran a company that we make genetically engineered cat girls for domestic ownership. Who am I going to hire on my team to run the Cat Girl Academy? What am I looking for in the candidates that are going to be teachers? I would want them to be like military level discipline with how seriously they take things and how empathetic they are, but not in a way that it's easy for them to get walked over, in a way that they are responsible for their own behavior and they convey this responsibility on to the girls so that they would develop responsibility themselves. So basically, principles of good mentorship, principles of good parenting fall in along similar lines to principles of good mentorship. It's just a different context. So if I am thinking about running an academy, then responsibility would have to be front and center for the focus of values. And that would be so important to focus on values and what guides how you're supposed to behave. You would need to have a very strong set of values, which we don't really have in a lot of modern countries, because a lot of it is just do whatever makes you feel good, man. Go with the flow. So that's another point of contrast that would be very interesting to explore more with genetically engineered cat girls for domestic ownership and having an academy that brings them up. Such a great idea. idea. Now that I say it out loud, I am sure that there's an anime out there that is Catgirl Maid Academy or something like that. Part 2, Step 3 of apologizing to your cat.